Two aggressive bikers at a gas station in California thought they had found an easy target when they started harassing a woman alone inside the convenience store. What they didn't know was that this woman was Sandra Bullock, and that Keanu Reeves was right there, watching their every move, and what he was about to do would make those two men regret it for the rest of their lives. Before we continue this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. It was a busy weekend in Hollywood. The streets of Beverly Hills were filled with luxury cars, photographers fought for the best shot, and fans crowded the sidewalks around red carpets, hoping to catch a glimpse of their idols that night. One event stood out among them all, a charity gala in Beverly Hills, organized to raise funds in support of young aspiring actors and filmmakers. Among the most anticipated guests, two names shone the brightest: Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. The original plan was simple. They would arrive separately at the event, give interviews and fulfill their usual commitments. But just hours before the gala, Keanu had a different idea. Instead of facing Los Angeles traffic separately, he suggested they go together. They would take the coastal highway, far from the congestion and chaos of the city. The setting was perfect. Key's red Ferrari sliced through the asphalt as the sun set over the ocean, casting golden hues across the landscape. For a moment it was just a peaceful drive, a rare moment of quiet before an eventful night. But soon everything would change, because this wouldn't be an ordinary drive. And before they even realized it, they were already on the radar of people who shouldn't have been there. The red Ferrari purred as it glided down the highway, the California sun reflecting off its sleek frame. Keanu kept one hand on the wheel, driving with effortless ease. Sandra sitting in the passenger seat. With a relaxed smile, she turned to face him. "I'm getting major déjà vu right now." Keanu smirked. "If you're talking about speed, at least this time we don't have a bus about to explode, which is already a relief. And look at that, this time I'm the one driving." Sandra raised an eyebrow, which makes me wonder, have you actually gotten better at driving since then? Keanu feigned offense. "Are you saying, I don't know how to drive, I just remember that INP speed. My character had to take the wheel because you were too busy dealing with a terrorist?" Keanu let out a short laugh. "Well, at least now we're heading to a charity gala. No bad guys in sight." Sandra folded her arms and smiled. "Never say that too soon." The road stretched ahead, clear and peaceful. Then a warning flashed on the dashboard. Low fuel level. Keanu frowned and tapped the panel lightly. Speaking of problems, Sandra glanced at the fuel gauge and laughed. "Don't tell me you forgot to refuel." Keanu sighed. "Let's just say I was too busy enjoying the moment." Sandra pointed ahead. "Well, lucky for you, there's a gas station right there." Keanu followed her gaze and spotted the only gas station in sight. It was one of those old roadside stops with only fuel pumps, a weathered convenience store, and a flickering neon sign that looked like it could go out at any second. The place seemed deserted. Keanu slowed down and pulled into the station. The Ferrari's engine hummed softly before shutting off. Sandra took off her sunglasses and stretched. "Since we're stopping, I'm going to grab a coffee." Keanu nodded. "I'll fill up the car. See you inside." Sandra opened the door and walked toward the convenience store, who stepped out, opened the fuel tank and grabbed the gas pump. The soft click of fuel flowing filled the quiet air, and at that moment they were noticed leaning against two motorcycles. Two men watched them closely. Worn leather jackets, chains wrapped around their wrists, dark sunglasses reflecting the afternoon sun. They didn't look like regular travelers, and when Sandra walked past them, something changed. The first, a huge man with a thick beard and tattooed arms, whistled. Some softly, well, look at this the second. A leaner guy with a crooked grin and a gold tooth leaned forward. Hollywood, huh? Don't see that every day. The bigger man kept his eyes on Sandra as she walked into the store, oblivious to them, but the two bikers never took their eyes off her. The one with the gold tooth chuckled. Maybe we should go introduce ourselves. The big guy smirked, and without hesitation, they started walking toward the store. Little did they know that by pulling into that gas station, they had just stepped into the sights of two men looking for an easy target. The door to the convenience store closed behind Sandra Bullock, and the sound of the metallic bell echoed through the quiet space. The place was small, outdated with narrow aisles and a counter worn down by time. At the back of the store, an old television played a baseball game on mute, while a radio hummed a slow, melancholic country song. Sandra walked casually to the coffee station, grabbing a disposable cup outside. Keanu Reeves finished fueling the Ferrari, but his eyes were locked on the store's glass window, and he didn't like what he saw. The two bikers who had been leaning against their motorcycles were now on the move. The bigger one, a bearded man with thick arms covered in tattoos, walked slowly, cracking his knuckles as if he had all the time in the world. The other, leaner with a gold tooth and a crooked grin, kept his hands tucked inside his leather jacket pockets. They crossed the parking lot with a strange, calculated confidence. Keanu noticed their eyes locked on to Sandra. He noticed the way they exchanged a quick smirk. Before stepping inside, he recognized a problem before it even started. But he didn't move just yet, because sometimes the best thing to do is wait and observe. And that's exactly what he was going to do. Sandra was focused on pouring her coffee. She tore open a sugar packet and emptied it into her cup. That's when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She frowned slightly and glanced at the reflection in the coffee machine's glass. The two men were there. The big one casually leaned against the counter beside her, as if he had just happened to stop there. The other, the one with the gold tooth, stood a little further back, but his eyes never left her. Sandra didn't show discomfort right away. She was used to being recognized in public places, so when the big guy spoke, she didn't immediately assume the worst. Well, look who we have here. Hollywood in person. Sandra turned around slowly, holding her cup of coffee, forcing a polite smile. Guess I've been spotted. The skinny guy let out a low chuckle, scanning her from head to toe. And what brings a woman like you to a place like this? Sandra noticed that they were partially blocking the way to the exit. The glass door was still in sight, but somehow it suddenly seemed farther away. She took a quiet breath, staying calm, just grabbing some coffee, while my friend fuels up outside. The big guy raised an eyebrow. Left you all alone in here, doesn't seem very safe. Sandra let out a short laugh. I think I'll be just fine. She grabbed a lid for her coffee and prepared to leave, but the skinny biker stepped to the side, subtly blocking her path. Whoa, already leaving, but we just started talking. Sandra kept her expression composed, but now her body was on alert. Outside, Keanu Reeves continued watching through the store's glass window. He saw how the two bikers had gotten too close. He saw Sandra's slight shift in posture, and he knew she had realized the situation. But for now, he still didn't move, because he wanted to be sure of what these two men were really up to. Sandra tried stepping sideways, but the skinny biker mirrored her movement, keeping her cornered. The big guy grinned, leaning in slightly closer. Bet you're used to dealing with rude guys in Hollywood, huh? But we're real gentlemen around here. Sandra tightened her grip on the coffee cup. Now she knew this wasn't just a casual conversation. She kept her voice calm but firm. If you're a gentleman, then I'm sure you wouldn't mind letting me through. The skinny guy grinned even wider. Of course. But before you go, how about a little toast? Maybe we could even take you somewhere more fun outside. Keanu's. expression hardened. He saw the biker with the gold tooth, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. He saw Sandra take a step back, and he realized what was about to happen. He knew these guys were testing her limits, and that if she tried to leave, they might try to stop her. Keanu took a slow breath. Now it was just a matter of time, but he still didn't enter the store because he wanted to see just how far these two would take it. The big guy crossed his arms, staring at Sandra. "Come on now, no need to be scared," the skinny one smirked. "We just want to talk a little." Sandra realized she needed to get out now. She took another step back, trying to position herself for an exit, but then the skinny biker reached out and grabbed her arm. Sandra froze, and at that exact moment, Keanu Reeves stepped away from his position and began walking toward the store, slowly controlled but now ready to act. The man grabbed Sandra's arm and grinned, but outside, Keanu Reeves was already on his way, and once he stepped inside, everything would change. The silence inside the store felt heavier than usual. Sandra felt the firm grip of the skinny biker on her arm. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't scream, didn't panic, but she knew she had to get out of there immediately. The bigger biker, leaning against the counter, smirked. "What's the matter? Don't like a little attention?" The skinny biker tightened his grip slightly, testing her reaction. Sandra felt her pulse quicken, but kept her composure. "I told you I need to go." She pulled her arm back, trying to break free. Discreetly, the biker held on just a little longer. "Relax, Star, we're just having fun." At that exact moment, the store's door swung open and the sound of the metal bell echoed through the room. Keanu Reeves stepped inside. Slow, controlled, each step made the old wooden floor creak slightly. The tension in the store shifted instantly. The store clerk, a skinny kid wearing a backward cap, froze in place, sensing the sudden shift in the air. Sandra felt it too, and most importantly, the bikers felt it. The skinny biker was still holding Sandra's arm, but now he wasn't moving. His eyes lifted to Keanu, who had stopped just a few feet away. The bigger biker uncrossed his arms. Well, he muttered, scanning Keanu from head to toe. Keanu didn't say a word. He simply glanced at Sandra, making sure she was okay. It was quick, subtle, but Sandra understood immediately. The skinny biker noticed this silent exchange and let go of her arm, but he tried to act like he was still in control. "And you didn't even introduce us to your friend Keanu." Finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, but carried something that made even the bigger biker stiffen. "You're going to apologize to her?" The skinny biker squinted slightly. What Keanu didn't repeat himself. He simply took a step forward, slow but just enough for both bikers to instinctively shift back half an inch. It was subtle, but Keanu noticed, and the bikers noticed that he noticed. The bigger biker forced a chuckle. "Listen, Reeves, we didn't do anything. We were just messing around." Keanu kept his eyes on the skinny one. "Apologized." The store clerk swallowed nervously. Sandra said nothing. She just watched the skinny biker forced a smirk. "I think you're taking this a little too seriously, man. Relax." Keanu took another step forward. Now he was barely a meter away, close enough that they could feel his presence like a weight. He tilted his head slightly. "I don't repeat myself." The skinny biker smirk faded. He looked at the bigger biker. The bigger biker didn't say a word. He realized that the game had changed. Now they were no longer in control. The skinny biker exhaled sharply, then muttered towards Sandra. Sorry, Sandra crossed her arms. That was pathetic. Keanu raised an eyebrow slightly. The bigger biker clenched his jaw, feeling the humiliation settling in. He looked at Keanu, happy now. Keanu shrugged. Almost the store clerk held his breath. The bigger biker inhaled deeply, then grabbed his friend's arm. "Let's go." But before stepping outside, he glared at Keanu one last time and said something that made Sandra shiver. "This ain't over." Keanu didn't blink. He just watched them walk out of the store and back to their bikes. The sound of their engines rumbled through the gas station until finally they were gone. Sandra let out a long breath, only now realizing how tense she had been. Keanu watched her for a moment. "You okay?" She let out a half laugh, still catching her breath. "Yeah, just didn't expect my coffee stop to turn into an action scene." The store clerk was still standing there, mouth slightly open. Dude, that was insane. Keanu didn't answer. He was still looking outside. The parking lot was empty now, but something felt off. He knew those two bikers weren't the type to just let things go. And maybe this wasn't over yet. Sandra exhaled, relieved, but Keanu kept staring out of the store because deep down he knew this was over. Yet Keanu stepped outside first, scanning the surroundings. The sun was still high, the gas station still empty, but then he stopped. Sandra noticed his hesitation as she stepped out behind him. "What is it?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He just looked around. The parking lot seemed empty, but something was different. Sandra followed his gaze, and then she saw it too. One of the bikers had left something behind on the ground. Next to the Ferrari lay a black motorcycle helmet tossed carelessly. It hadn't been there before. Keanu narrowed his eyes. Sandra felt a chill run down her spine. Did they forget it? Keanu took a slow step forward, eyeing the object. He didn't pick it up. He just stared at it. There was nothing inside, no note, no message. But he didn't need words to understand what this meant. Sandra swallowed hard. She wasn't naive. She knew. Leaving something behind like this wasn't an accident. It was a silent message and maybe a trap to see how they would react. Keanu finally moved. He ignored the helmet and opened the car door. "Let's go." Sandra didn't argue. She simply got in the car quickly. Keanu took one last look around, then without another word started the engine. The Ferrari's powerful roar cut through the eerie silence of the gas station. They pulled away slowly, and behind them the helmet remained there, untouched, as if someone was waiting to see what they would do with it. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Sandra finally spoke. "Do you think that was on purpose?" Keanu kept his eyes on the road. His voice was calm but firm. "Yes." Sandra ran a hand through her hair, trying to process. But why, if they wanted to do something, wouldn't it have been easier back there? Keanu gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Some guys don't act right away. They wait for the right moment. Sandra didn't like that answer. She glanced at the rear-view mirror, and that's when her heart dropped back on the road. In the distance, something was coming toward them, something fast. Two motorcycles. Sandra felt her stomach twist as she saw them because now there was no doubt they were being followed. The red Ferrari roared against the hot asphalt of the highway. The afternoon sun was still shining brightly in the sky, but inside the car, the tension was heavy. Sandra glanced at the rearview mirror, her body stiff. "Keanu, tell me I'm imagining this." Keanu kept his eyes on the road, but took a quick glance at the mirror. And there they were, two motorcycles. They weren't coming fast, they were still keeping a considerable distance, but they were there following them. And the most worrying part, they weren't trying to pass. They weren't acting like normal bikers on an open highway. They were matching in the Ferrari's pace. Silent, watching, waiting. Keanu took a deep breath, assessing the situation. If they tried to speed up too much, they'd attract too much attention on the road. If they slowed down, the bikers might get closer. It was a waiting game, and Keanu wasn't the type to lose at this kind of game. Sandra exhaled slowly. "What do they want?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. He kept the car at a steady speed, his eyes never leaving the mirror. "We're still close to the city. They won't do anything here." Sandra clenched her fingers on her lap. "And what if they wait until we leave the highway?" Keanu turned to her for a brief second. "Then we won't let that happen." The highway stretched ahead, but soon they would reach a curve that led to a more isolated area. Keanu knew that he had to make a decision now, so in a calculated move, he slightly reduced the speed he wanted to test what the bikers would do if they just passed them. Maybe he was overthinking it, but if they also slowed down, Sandra noticed his strategy. She glanced back at the mirror, and then the biker slowed down too at the exact same pace. Sandra held her breath. Keanu kept his face neutral, but now he was certain they weren't imagining things, they were being followed, and now they had to act. Keanu tightened his grip on the steering wheel, repairing. He quickly scanned the upcoming road signs a little ahead. There was an exit ramp off the highway, a detour that could lead them onto smaller roads. Not the ideal route to the charity event, but that was the least of their problems. Now Sandra glanced at him. "You're about to do something right." Keanu smirked slightly, not a smirk of amusement, but the kind of calm, knowing smile of someone who had been through too much to be rattled by this hold on tight. That was all he said. And then he shifted gears and turned the wheel sharply. The Ferrari swerved onto the exit ramp, cutting off from the main highway onto a smaller, more secluded road. The tires screeched against the pavement, and in the rear-view mirror, the biker reacted instantly. They swerved too, following them. Sandra bit her lip. They took the bait. Keanu kept his eyes locked on the road. Now let's see how far they're willing to go. The side road was narrower, full of curves, the kind of terrain that favored motorcycles, not sports cars, and the bikers knew it. Now they were accelerating, starting to get closer. Sandra turned her head, looking out the window. The bigger biker was on the right side, keeping dangerously close to the Ferrari. He wasn't trying to pass, he was just staring at. Keanu felt his pulse pick up, not out of fear, but because now he knew there was no turning back. They wanted something, and he wasn't about to wait to find out what the skinny biker made. The first hostile move, he accelerated and got dangerously close to the side of the car. Sandra gripped the dashboard, her heart pounding. "Keanu, they're getting too close." Keanu narrowed his eyes, staying calm. Then, in a precise, calculated move, he tapped the brakes slightly. The Ferrari slowed down for just a fraction of a second, and the skinny biker, who wasn't expecting the sudden shift, lost his balance. His bike wobbled, and he had to correct the trajectory to avoid skidding. Keanu took advantage of the moment. He gripped the wheel and took a sharp curve without slowing down too much. The car slid smoothly through the turn, but for the motorcycles, the angle was much harder to take at that speed. The skinny biker fell back slightly. Sandra saw it happen and let out a tense smile. "You threw off his timing." Keanu didn't respond, but inside, he knew this wasn't over yet. The road was still narrowing, and the bikers weren't backing down. Then the big one did something unexpected. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something metallic. Sandra saw it before Keanu did. Her eyes widened. "He's got a chain." And before Keanu could react, the biker swung the chain into the air and flung it straight toward the windshield. The chain spun through the air, heading straight for the Ferrari's windshield. Keanu had a fraction of a second to react, and what he did next would change everything. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. The chain spun through the air, heading straight for the Ferrari's windshield. Sandra held her breath, eyes wide. Keanu was already reacting with a sharp and precise movement. He jerked the steering wheel to the left, the car swerved, and the chain missed the windshield by inches, slamming onto the asphalt behind them. Sandra exhaled sharply, her heart racing. They're completely insane. Keanu kept his focus on the road. Now there was no doubt this wasn't just a chase, they were attacking, and he wasn't about to wait for the next strike. Keanu analyzed the situation in seconds. The road was narrow, full of tight curves. The bikers were pressing them, waiting for them to make a mistake. But Keanu wasn't the kind of man who made mistakes. Under pressure, he clenched his jaw and spoke without taking his eyes off the road. "Hold on, Sandra." She gripped the dashboard tightly. "What are you going to do?" Keanu took a deep breath, turned the tables, and then he suddenly let go of the accelerator. The Ferrari slowed down abruptly, and the bikers had no time to react. The big guy, who was about to make another move, almost crashed into the back of the car and had to swerve at the last second to avoid colliding. The skinny biker also lost balance, and that was exactly what Keanu wanted. He had thrown them off their rhythm. Now it was his turn to strike. Keanu shifted gears and hit the accelerator again. The Ferrari's engine roared, and now he was in control of the chase. The bikers tried to regain position, but Keanu wasn't going to let that happen. He made a calculated maneuver, shifting the car closer to the side of the road, forcing them to spread out. The skinny biker tried to close in again, but Keanu angled the steering wheel strategically, kicking up a thick cloud of dust and gravel. The biker got a face full of dust, momentarily blinding him. That was enough. His bike wobbled, and he had to slow down to regain control. Now only one remained. The big guy was more persistent. He accelerated even more, positioning himself right beside the car. Sandra saw his expression. It wasn't just anger, it was wounded. Pride, and men like that don't like losing. Keanu understood what he was trying to do. He wasn't just trying to intimidate. He wanted to force Keanu off the road. But Keanu already had a plan. He kept the Ferrari steady, pretending not to react. Then at the perfect moment, he turned the wheel slightly to the right. It was just a subtle movement, but to the biker, it looked like an attack. He instinctively jerked his handlebars to dodge, but he was going too fast, and the road was unforgiving. His bike swerved, and for a second he lost control, and 1 second was all Keanu needed. The biker tried to regain balance, but his motorcycle clipped the edge of the curb. The bike shook violently, and the big guy was forced to brake hard to avoid wiping out. Keanu didn't wait. He slammed the accelerator. Sandra looked back. The bikers were falling behind. They weren't chasing anymore. They had lost Tio, kept the speed high for a few more miles. Sandra kept looking at the mirror, expecting to see the bikes coming back, but they didn't when they finally merged onto a more populated road. She let out a long sigh. "I think it's over." Keanu kept his eyes on the road, but his voice was cautious for now. Sandra looked at him. "You think they'll try again?" Keanu pressed his lips together for a second. "Guys like them don't like losing." She took a deep breath. "Great, exactly what I wanted to hear." Keanu finally smirked a little. "Just a guess." Sandra shook her head but let out a short laugh because somehow she knew he was right. The car continued down the road, blending into traffic, but Keanu still checked the mirror every now and then because something deep inside him told him this wasn't over yet. The danger seemed to be behind them, but Keanu knew better than anyone. Some stories don't end that easily. The red Ferrari glided smoothly up to the entrance of the luxury hotel, where the charity event was taking place. The camera flashes the reporters at the entrance, the elegantly dressed guests. Everything indicated that something grand was happening here. Sandra let out a relieved sigh. "Well, looks like we made it here in one piece." Keanu didn't answer right away. His gaze was still focused on the rear-view mirror, scanning for any suspicious movement. Sandra noticed. "Keanu, are you still worried about those guys?" He finally turned his eyes away from the mirror and looked at Hurl's go inside. "Don't worry." His tone was reassuring, but deep down he knew something still felt off after a few hours at the event. Sandra finally seemed relaxed, chatting and laughing with some guests. Keanu, on the other hand, needed a moment of silence. He stepped away from the main hall and took the elevator down to the hotel parking garage. The place was quiet. only a few dim lights illuminating the luxury cars parked there. He walked calmly toward the Ferrari and then he stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly across the side of the car. A deep scratch ran through the red paint. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this on purpose. Keanu returned to the event. Sandra was still in the ballroom sipping some wine and laughing at something someone had said. When she saw him, she raised an eyebrow. "You disappeared. Where were you?" Keanu picked up a champagne glass from a passing waiter, raised it slightly in the air, and changed the subject. "I think we can toast now the worst is over." Sandra narrowed her eyes. Suspicious. "Are you sure?" Keanu smiled calmly. "Absolutely." They clinked their glasses, and Sandra never knew that on that very same night, a scratch on the side of a car ended a war that could have lasted much longer. Because some battles aren't won with fists or words, some are settled in silence, where only those who truly understand the game know who actually won. If you enjoyed this story, we have many more that will warm your heart. Click the screen to explore more stories of hope, compassion, and resilience.